Hi, my name is Nilsson, and I'll be presenting this paper on behalf of our team, which also includes Joel Fischer, Andy Crabtree, Mari Goulden and Jocelyn Spence from the University of Nottingham, as well as Enrico Costanza from the University College London. At the most basic level, what our paper sets out to do is to explore some of the potential futures that have been envisioned for ubiquitous computing. Ubiquitous computing, or simply UBICOMP, is currently undergoing a rapid proliferation. The value of the smart home sector alone is set to exceed $150 billion by the end of 2024. In the light of this trend, it seems inevitable that UBICOMP technology will have a profound impact on everyday life. As designers, it is therefore productive for us to consider where all of this might lead us, and what our design goals and priorities ought to look like as we move into the future. The father of ubiquitous computing, Mark Weiser, has himself famously envisioned a future with our everyday environments being augmented by a wide spectrum of computational resources. UBICOMP technology would simply provide us with assistance wherever and whenever we would need it. All this would be taken care of by computer systems running calmly in the background, without requiring much human control or oversight. Yet, all this focus on efficiency and convenience might also come at a cost. A growing number of researchers argues that a strong reliance on proactive computing systems might be incompatible with key human values. Although having computing systems do some of our work on our behalf can indeed sound nice, if taken too far, this practice would also end up taking away much of our freedom to engage in tasks proactively and independently, to be creative, to explore and discover, as well as to socialize and collaborate with other people. In short, in spite of having good intentions, the realization of Weiser's UBICOMP vision could leave us with an overall passive and solitary lifestyle. Facing this prospect, scholars have been increasingly suggesting that perhaps we should aim for a different vision, one that would prioritize proactive people over proactive machines. For example, Yvonne Rogers argued that designers should strive to develop solutions that would augment the human intellect and enable people to perform ever greater feats, extending their ability to learn, make decisions, reason, create, solve complex problems, and generate innovative ideas. This then seems to leave us with a dilemma. On the one hand, we have the vision of calm computing, with its focus on proactive machines. And on the other hand, we have the notion of engaging computing, focusing on proactive people. In our own search for an answer, we produced two distinct animated video scenarios. The first one envisioned a convenient and efficient lifestyle achieved through calm ubiquitous computing systems operating on behalf of their users. The other one depicted a system that actively engaged its users to promote a more active and social lifestyle. For example, the reordering, delivery, and even cooking of food in the calm computing scenario was handled automatically in the background. As a result, the user barely had to do any work at all. On the other hand, in the case of the engaging computing scenario, the user was encouraged to cooperate with the local community, such as by prioritizing locally produced food and donating food items that were going out of date. These scenarios then served as the focal point for our engagement with prospective users. Specifically, we carried out 6 focus group sessions featuring a total number of 28 people from the general public, representing all walks of life. Each focus group session lasted for about 2 hours. The screening of each scenario was followed by a short discussion in order to give our participants a chance to reflect on what they saw. So what did we find? A defining aspect of the workshop study was the manner in which participants initially voiced preference for the engaging vision of the future UBICOMP technology, only to gradually gravitate towards a significantly more nuanced view as soon as they started to relate the depicted ideas to their own everyday life. This underlying reasoning revealed a rich spectrum of relevant human values. Following a thematic analysis, we categorized these values into 3 broad and partially overlapping themes, in the form of convenience, trust, and choice. The prospect of having systems take care of our work on our behalf, such as by automatically handling food deliveries and restocking the fridge, was something that the majority of our participants felt a bit skeptical about. The general perception was that without having any work to do, our lives would eventually become bland, monotonous, and boring. There can, in other words, be such a thing as too much convenience. As the focus group discussions evolved, however, it became increasingly clear that systems pursuing greater user convenience are in themselves not a problem. Rather, it is what we do with this convenience that matters. By doing work on our behalf, such systems would effectively free up our time for activities that we value, such as allowing us to spend more time with our family. In a sense, our participants were thus suggesting that calm computing systems designed with user convenience in mind could in fact end up encouraging a more active and social lifestyle. Many of the ideas proposed by our engaging computing scenario were initially viewed positively, only to end up problematized as the discussion progressed. The notion of reducing food waste by collaborating and exchanging food within the local community is a good example. Most of our participants agreed that their willingness to accept a food-sharing mechanism would largely depend on whether and how well they knew the person they were getting the food from. For example, when confronted with the idea of having to deal with strangers, participants voiced their concerns regarding the manner in which the food had been stored and taken care of. It seems evident then that a UbiComp system designed to stimulate a prosocial lifestyle could instead end up causing mistrust and tensions. Our participants' responses suggested that having some choice is welcomed for fostering agency, but on the other hand, having too much choice is rejected as inhibitive. Choice then can be seen as a burden, but at the same time, if taken away, this becomes threatening to selfhood, to one's role as an autonomous, proactive person. Once again, it becomes apparent that when motivating their stances, our participants were increasingly bypassing the original dichotomy between calm and engaging computing, and instead invoked their own personal values. So what does all this mean? A common denominator of the focus group discussions was the notion that calm computing can indeed coexist with an engaging lifestyle. It appears then that values traditionally associated with calm computing, such as convenience and efficiency, do not necessarily constitute a polar opposite to those of a proactive and social life. By the same token, proactive technologies and proactive people do not by nature constitute mutually exclusive design goals. Thus, the visions of Weiser and Rogers do not appear to be inherently irreconcilable after all. Rather, our findings suggest that the two can coexist and perhaps even develop synergistic relationships, each with its own set of potential trade-offs emerging through their interplay with a rich set of practical human values. More fundamentally then, what our findings show is that it is not the vision behind a particular design solution that dictates the manner in which it ends up being used, nor the impacts it will have on the everyday life. Once deployed, entirely new patterns of use will emerge through the process of bottom-up appropriation that the designer could scarcely have predicted in the first place. There can, in other words, be a vast gap between the intentions behind a design on the one hand and the actual user practice on the other. Instead of adopting grand overarching visions, such as that of Weiser's calm computing, we would thus argue that designers should start out by asking themselves questions pertaining to the locally organized values. In order to find an answer to questions such as these, it is crucial that prospective users are involved from the very envisioning stage of a design process. In this work, We aspire to take a step into this direction by conveying multiple contrasting visions of future technology rather than just one, and thus allow prospective users a greater sense of freedom to bring up the values that matter to them.